TSF youth, all kids, not youth, sorry, kids. Come kids. All the youth group is like, okay, man, I'm coming up there. You guys are doing good. You guys just hang out here. Because I need you guys' help with an experiment. Oh, and there's a bunch of them. Ella doesn't want, oh, Ella, I love you. Okay. You don't have to if you don't want to. It's okay. Because this is going to be like a brave moment in all things. Matthew, you look excited. You look like me this morning. I'd say before I got my coffee, but I don't drink coffee. Okay, Autumn, you going to be part of it too? Okay. So it might take a couple seconds. Here's the thing. For years, I've been saying good morning to these people. And most of the time when I do it, they don't say much back until the second time I do it. So I've been experimenting with this. The first time it's like, good morning, and they're like, and then good morning, they get loud. And then what I've learned in the last couple of weeks is it's me. Because I've had Kerry come up and do it, and they were real loud back. Chuck came up and did it, they were real loud back. So what I need is like a mass study. So whoever wants to do it, now remember, you're not allowed to stay on the chairs, but if the pastor says you can stay on the chair, this is your moment, okay? Stay on the chair and say good morning to them and see what they do back. Is anybody brave enough to do that? I knew. Okay, everybody else is thinking about it. Okay, I'm going to hold your hand so you can get up there, look at you. You don't need me. What am I even doing here?
Good morning! Good morning!
Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, Ella, you going to give a shot? Okay, give a shot.
Good morning! Good morning!
And you were so thrilled doing so. Anybody else going to give it a shot? You going to try it? Okay. I see it in your eyes.
Good morning!
Good. Anybody else? Charlie, you going to try it? Charlie, I have to say.
Good morning! Good morning!
Who else? Anybody else going to give a shot? You in? Okay, go.
Good morning!
Yeah, I see this is going. Anybody else? Go.
Good morning! Good morning!
Yep. Autumn, you want to give a shot? Anybody else want to give a shot? You want to try it? No? Matthew, you want to give it a shot? No, she gone. She's gone. Okay, so I'm going to try it, and I'll show you what happens. You ready? Okay? Good morning. You guys can go to class. It's just because they don't like me. They don't like me.
Maybe say it louder.
So if I say it louder? What do you think? I think they were just kind of appeasing me, weren't they? You guys can go to class. Thanks, guys, for helping me out. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks, Matthew. Thank you, guys. Would you like us back, Tom? Tom's all nervous about people seeing his knees. Well, guys, we're going to dig back into our study. And we're going to go back into 1 Corinthians 15 if you want to get there. 15, verse 35 is where we're going. Again, there's Bibles around the room in the baskets underneath the chairs. If you need one, if you want to have one, go ahead and take it with you. We have YouVersion up and running for those who like to do on their phones or their tablets, and all the tools are there for you, and your Bibles as well. But we're just going to kind of dig in and see what we have. Kerry, before I forget, I'm a lousy thrower, so I'm not going to throw it. But we'll really get into the tail end of this margin series that we have been in since the end of January, where we're going through 1 Corinthians. We're looking at, again, all these different topics that the church was dealing with at the time, struggles that different people within the church were dealing with, that we still deal with today. We've been looking at their context as well as our context to see what we can learn and dig into, and there's multiple different ones with the goal of how can we grow to be more like Jesus in these multiple different areas. As we've been going through that study, we have had a couple pauses within it that Paul has given us to make sure that we understand why we're doing this. There's a pause that he has with the spiritual gifts, the biggest struggle that this church was dealing with, to just stop and say, let's talk about love. I'm sure I'm pushing everybody's buttons. Let's just talk about how great love is and what it looks like and what it should be. What we've been in right now is another one of these little mini sections where there's a pause about the gospel. Because as we go through all these different things that we can do or that we can lean into or things that we can sacrifice or things that we can submit to grow to be more like Jesus, after a while, Paul is aware that we can kind of forget why we're talking about this and be like, who is this guy? Oh, I'm just so tired of dealing with this. Or why am I always the one sacrificing or dealing with things? And Paul really wants to dig into the reason we're talking about this is because you and I are blessed. Blessed that God sent his Son so that we can have reconciliation, that we can have life, that we can have passion, that we can have purpose, and we have the gift of growing to be more like Jesus. So it's just really speaking to that perspective, because we can take it to places a little bit more worldly than what he's talking about, where he's talking about great passion and great purpose. This is week 3 of that break. The first week he really studied us into the resurrection of Jesus Christ, why we have all this, why we can believe in all this. And he talked about the evidence of believing in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the physical evidence, the scriptural evidence, the eyewitnesses, the personal account that he himself has, his personal testimony. And then last week we moved into a section where he's talking about not just Jesus' resurrection, but you and I will be resurrected. Spiritually now, for those who accept Jesus as leader and forgive in their lives, by acknowledging with their mouth he's the Son of God, believe in their hearts he died and rose again, give their life back to him, follow him. But even physically, that we are going to be resurrected again. That outside the rapture, you and I will die. Eventually, at some point. But that there's a physical resurrection, which he went into and talked about the evidence into that last week as well. So we have a hope for the future, but also the difference that resurrection makes into our lives today as we're resurrected spiritually. There's no such thing as saying, I've done too much that God can forgive me. Or you don't understand, I'm nothing. My insecurity is shot and just, I've got nothing to offer. There's no such thing as that. He can resurrect all of us. He resurrects all of us, taking ash to beauty. And so we're going to continue back into that part of that conversation, because I think there's some other points that he wants to kind of bring back to the forefront. Some of them may have been points that you've heard before. I beg you to stop and listen to it with fresh ears, to see what the Spirit has to say to you about it today. You may have been walking with him since you were 5 years old, and the Spirit has something new for you today. I think all of us know that. I don't have to convince you of that. But there's some great truths within this that really helps us to bring everything to an end. Next week, we're going to talk about one more margin area. Week after that, we're going to talk about just the wonder and the mystery and just kind of bring it all together. But today, we're just kind of focusing on the gospel. Why are we talking about margins? Why should we be leaning into it? What should our priorities be? What should our faith steps be? So we're going to read a little, talk a little like we usually do, and see what he does today. So, starting out verse 35, if you would, it says this. But after he made this argument for a resurrected body, he says, but somebody will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body do they come? You foolish person, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And what you sow is not the body that is to be, but a bare kernel, perhaps of wheat or some other grain. But God gives it to a body as he has chosen, and to each kind of seed its own body. For not all flesh is the same, but there is one kind for humans, another for animals, another for birds, and another for fish. There are heavenly bodies and there's earthly bodies, but the glory of the heavenly is of one kind, and the glory of the earthly is of another. There is one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars, for stars even differ from other stars in their glory. So if he starts out, again, kind of trying to get attention, trying to get somebody to kind of wake up a little bit. He's got the naysayers, those who say there is no such thing as a resurrected body that he's been fighting against, and he's just kind of assuming as they read this letter they're going to continue putting up their walls, or continue doing their fight, they continue to ask questions that, quite frankly, I think are natural for us to ask, but not necessarily something that matters. What will my body be like? What kind of body? Trying to continue the conversation past what matters. It's like, don't be foolish. Just stop. Just stop. And if you were here last week, this is kind of the same temperament that he ended with last week. Last week, he's just like, when it comes to sin, just stop it. Look around yourself. Look at what you're doing. Look at who you're hanging out with, and just stop it and walk away from sin. He's just kind of getting really bold that after all of these chapters, not that he had chapters, but for us, all these chapters, he's saying, we've talked about a lot of things. There's things that the Spirit has put on your heart. I absolutely believe that the Spirit has put things on your heart, and it's time to do something about it. That he knows that we are creatures who know something, feel something, and then go right back into the same pattern that we had before, because it's just so hard sometimes. Outside of him, it can be so hard. And so he's just kind of putting it all on the table. Say, okay, as we're getting to the end of this, stop it, look around yourself, move forward. And here, when he's talking about taking and going back and forth on whether or not you're resurrected, just stop being foolish. Now, most of you guys know, especially I know with our Sunday school class that's going through on how to read the Bible, I talk oftentimes about how when a word just kind of pops out of Scripture, a lot of times I like to look up the definition to that word and see what Webster has to say about it, even if I know what the word means. I mean, I know what the word foolish means. I'm a husband. I get it. I know what foolish means. She's in the room. I make fun of myself instead of her. You guys know this. But as I was looking at it, there's two things that stood out. One was a fool is a person who acts unwisely. Another act within that, foolish, is to trick or deceive someone. And I think he's purposely chosen this vocabulary to get our attention a little bit, because we're really good at deceiving ourselves. And being a fool, according to this definition, is not that you're an idiot or that I'm an idiot, but that sometimes we act unwisely. We know better. I don't know why I did it for the third time this week. It hasn't worked out before ever in my life. I don't know why I'm continuing on this cycle. I don't know why I can't get control of my anger. I don't know why I can't live in certain areas the fullness of what God has called me to. And so he's really kind of leaning in and kind of setting that tone to be able to say, this is what God invites us to. And this is what he calls us to. And so he uses the analogy when it comes to planting, when it comes to harvesting. We live in a farmer town. Unfortunately, half of the fields are not as pretty as what they usually are. And that's the least of the problem as far as how that impacts our farmers and how it impacts their economy and their households. But we know that planting, how it's supposed to work versus the challenges that come into play. And so he kind of works through that, and we'll put this up on the screen. I mean, this is very simple for those who like to take notes, is that we sow, we die, and then we live. I mean, I think, like, at one point I thought, well, should I bring in like a little thing of dirt and a seed and talk about it and plant everything else and do like some kind of big illustration type things, and those things are really fun and kind of help us connect. In the area we live in, I think we get it. I think we know how a seed works, right? And how you put it in and how it grows. I don't think there's anything new and revolutionary that I'm going to give you there. I think we all know how that works in our spiritual life for the most part. But stop and hear it with fresh ears. Stop and hear what the Spirit has to say to you. We sow, and then we die, and then we live. Now, I want to talk about those and just break that out a little bit on how that works spiritually. Since we understand it physically, let's talk about how it works spiritually. To sow a seed spiritually, first and foremost, is to take the seed and invest it. Spiritually, we're going right back to what we're talking about, is that none of us deserve Jesus, but all of us have Jesus available to us. And the first step of sowing is accepting Jesus as leader and forgiver in your life. A personal choice, not something you're raised with, not something that you inherit, it's something you choose. I accept Jesus as leader and forgiver in my life. I give him my life. I accept that forgiveness and that grace. He has done all the work, and the only task left is for me to submit myself fully to him. That's how we start to sow. The challenge is, again, in our culture, a lot of times that we present that if you say this little prayer, you get to go to heaven, and it stops there. And we really have lost in many areas of our culture powerful Christian living, full richness of living Jesus in our lives. And so we have to realize that sowing doesn't just stop with the prayer. We change. Part of sowing, part of putting this in, part of investing into this is being in the Word, hearing the Word, following Jesus, and changing. Probably the most quoted scriptures that we have outside salvation is here is, it says, do not deceive yourself. Don't hear the Word and then go out without doing it. It's sowing it. It's bringing it into your life. It's growing step by step. It's doing it again, even though you have failed before, but doing it with Christ. It's remembering your testimony. It's sharing your testimonies. It's inviting people. It's to not just church, but to what are they doing with Jesus, and how can you be part of that? It's praying for people. It's investing in yourself, that we continue to sow and invest, and it's hard work. Physically, it's hard work. Spiritually, it's hard work. And it's just as hard as it is easy. It's a conscious choice decision to say, yes, Lord. That really is the start. And we're sowing and we're putting those things out there. I don't know how everything's going to work out in my life. I don't know how everything's going to take shape tomorrow. All I know is that as I sow, God does the rest. God does the rest. In my life and in the life and the mission that he's called me to. So we're sowing. He's investing us into sowing instead of this foolish controversy that around them and around some of the things that we embrace in our lives. And to invest means that we also have to release. We have to release, which is the part of we die. We die to it. A lot of us, even when we're doing stuff for the Lord, want to see our desired result. Does that make sense? I mean, we want to trust Him with our money. We want to tithe. I just want to make sure that checkbook balance is really nice and good before I actually turn in the check, because I don't know what you're doing, God. Or I want to have a healed relationship with that person, but from my standpoint, I don't think we can ever be friends again. But, God, if you can take and fix that relationship in 5 minutes, I'll be nice to him again. We desire to have some kind of control or want that result to be ourselves. We need to release. We are in a constant process of dying to ourselves. When you're the strongest in your discipleship, you are dying again. When you're strongest in your discipleship, you are dying again to yourself and investing in the Lord and letting Him have His way. We'll put another scripture up here from 2 Corinthians, another letter that Paul wrote to this church. And if you want to read along with me, put it on screen just to make it easy since it's not our core text. But it says, we have this treasure in jars of clay. It actually was mentioned today in Sunday school. We have these treasures in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and it doesn't belong to us. We are afflicted in every way, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. We're persecuted, but we're not forsaken. We're struck down, but we are not destroyed. Always carrying in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to the death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life is in you. The seed will never do anything if you don't bury it. The seed does nothing if you don't bury it. We have to release it, and we give it to God, and we stop trying to have our own control with it and realize that we are called to a life of dying so that we can have true life. That's when things start poking up through the ground, when we start to see the plant move. I wish it was fast. I don't know. I know we have Office fans in here. Do you guys remember the episode where they were doing like the yard sale type stuff and Jim was selling the magic beans? You know what I'm talking about? And he got Dwight to get suckered in on it. He took the beans, he put them in the little containers and put them outside, and as soon as he walked away, Jim came out with the exact same containers, but the plants were already about this high, and switched them out, so when Dwight came out, he freaked out. It just doesn't work that way, though, does it? It's just not the way it works. We're constantly dying so that we can have life, so we can become something different. But when we die, then we live. Then we truly live. And my guess is most of us in this room, if you've not come to Jesus as forgiving your life today, I really invite you into this life with us. But for those who have, I've got a feeling that most of us have stories of times when we really felt like we were alive in Christ. When we really felt like we were walking with Him and our faith was just kind of like on that high level of the meter, and we weren't stressed out, we weren't maxed out, we weren't afraid, we weren't angry, and we weren't in despair. And it just seems like things are going. And then there's other times in our life, it's like, why can't it be like last month? Or why can't it be like last year? Or why can't it be like when I was in youth group? Or why couldn't it be like when I used to go to church camp? Or all these different things. That accessibility is always available to us. We are, struck down. We are persecuted. We go through the struggles. But we do not have to be destroyed. That's what the Scripture tells us. It's just we need more of Him. We need to continue to lean more into Him. We need to stop making those mistakes that put us backwards and cause the ripple effects into our lives. Again, I know it's hard, but it's also just that easy. As he continues talking about these things and talking about the glory that we can have, I love, even though it's somewhat perplexing to me, I guess, to get my whole mind around it. And I think that's okay because it's one of those things that I don't understand it, but I believe. There's a difference, again, between understanding and believing. Of just this whole poetry that goes into that not all flesh is the same, and there's different kinds for humans and animals and birds and fish and heavenly bodies and earthly bodies and the moon and the sun and the stars are different from the other stars. Just how God reveals Himself in glory. And so I don't know what it's going to look like in my life, and you don't know what it's going to look like in your life, whether it be from the spiritual or the physical, but it's His glory, and that's pretty good. We continue this massive array of God's creativity, like we talked about with the wildflowers in the field that just a few weeks ago, of how God is such a creative God. So how it looks for you physically, when you have your physical resurrection, how it looks for you spiritually today, is going to be different than me. But what's promised is his glory. It's his glory. Look what he says in 42. He says, so it is with the resurrection of the dead, this beautiful array, this beautiful glory that we can live in God. He says, what is sown is perishable, what is raised is imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, and it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. Thus it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. But it is not the spiritual that is first, but the natural, and then the spiritual. The first man was from the earth, a man of dust. The second, a man from heaven. As was the man of dust, so also are those who are of the dust. And as it is in the man of heaven, so are also those who are of heaven. Just as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we shall also bear the image of the man of heaven. There's an invitation for his glory to be in us and for us to live in his glory. Again, I wish it was easier to get our minds around. It's a God thing. I mean, it looks different. I wish it could kind of give us A, B, C. This is how it works. But the exciting news is the invitation itself. I looked up glory because I wanted to get into that a little bit, but I didn't go to Webster's. I went to the HarperCollins Bible Dictionary. Some of the things there I just wanted to share with you. The word is kabod, which is a Hebrew word that means weight or importance. As they continue to kind of put it out, make it broader, it says, in this sense, glory may be applied to humans, showing their significance in the world. But more often, glory is applied to God. God's glory seems to serve as God's presence of being. The glory of God is not just something to be beheld or to be watched, but it's something that believers may participate in. Are you participating in it? Are you living by his glory? As he goes through, there's another little chart there I'll get from you, Sarah, about sow versus raised. It really puts into perspective, at least to me, of the difference of what we give up versus what we get. He says, whatever is sown, it's perishable, it's dishonorable, it's weakness, and it's natural. But what God does with it, invests back into our lives, is imperishable, raised in glory, raised in power, and is of the spiritual. He's inviting us to see things from a different perspective. He is started by talking about there's two types of people, right? All of us were one, Adam. All of us was born into this world of sin. All of us are like Adam. And quite frankly, without God's breath, we're dust. Right? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We have that phrase for a reason. Take the life away from us. But what God does with ashes is beautiful. And it's imperishable. And it's eternal. And sometimes when I stop and I'm going through a struggle with something that's in my life, it's just amazing when I realize I'm struggling over something that's perishable, that's weakness, versus what God has for me. And sometimes I need Paul to step in and say, stop acting without wisdom. Stop fooling yourself. Stop on this pattern, because there is nothing of this world that is worthy to hold on to versus what he wants to replace it with. Do you see how he's bringing it all together? How he's trying to get us to really just come to the cross, somewhere, some way, to say whatever there is that's not God's glory is worthy to give up for God's glory in your life, in your ministry, and for eternity. What are you willing to give up for glory? What are you ready to hand over for glory? I shared a while back, it's been a few years, so most of you guys may have remember it, may not, may have been here, may not, but a testimony in my own life. When I was quite young, let's see, I would have been about 14 or 15 years old at this point, that involves my great-grandmother. Now, I want to show you a picture of my great-grandmother, but she's been gone for quite some time, and I don't have a lot of access to the photo, so I had to rely on my sister. And the one photo that she had handy to send to me, well, you can see. I don't come off looking that good. Yeah, bottom right-hand corner, that's 14-year-old version. That's my daughter's age version of me. But anyways, but this is my mom's side of the family, at least at that time. A little bit more than half have now gone on to heaven. The other half is still with us. And right here in the front with the purple flower is an incredible woman by the name of Ira. She was a pastor's wife, a very conservative pastor, and I believe Nazarene, if I remember correctly. She could be very tough, as great-grandmothers can be. She could be very blunt, as great-grandmothers could be. But she did live her life of faith. And in the early 80s, she started to get sick. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, over a span of about a decade, there was about 14 or 15 times we got a phone call saying, you need to come. Vi's not going to make it through the night. If Vi would make it through the night. She was just a tough lady, just a tough lady. But one of these times, in 1982, she did pass at the hospital for a period of time. And it's like what you hear on multiple stories of people that have passed away, where they have an experience. And in her experience, as she would tell it to us, is that she did see people that went before her that are in glory. She did see Jesus, and there was a conversation. And in the conversation, which we don't hear a lot of this, and again, I don't know if this is a vision from God or if this is an actual, but this was what she experienced within it, is that she had a choice where she could either come home. It had been a long road. She's about 84, I think, at this point. 83, I'm sorry. And she could go home and be in glory. That sounds pretty good. I'm sorry, but I've been in this world just a lot shorter time than that, but that sounds pretty good. That was her choice, or she could come back, because there were those in her family that need ministered to. And she came back, because having God's glory in her family members' lives meant more than her going home a few years earlier than what she actually did. And when she came back, about a month later, we got these letters. This is mine. It wasn't to my family, it was to me. Each household had an individual invitation. And within it is an invitation to a meeting that she was wanting to have with her family up in Fremont to come and to hear about Jesus. And we gathered, because you don't say no to great-grandmother, no matter if you think she's crazy or not. You go. And she shared. And she wanted to make sure she never left this world without sharing God's glory. If this woman can give up some time of glory to share God's glory, what is worthy to you that you think is better than God's glory that you're holding on to? That's what Paul's telling us to do. Don't be foolish. Don't act unwisely. Don't be tricking yourself. What God has is so much better. So today, as we get ready to have our baptisms, we've got 3 people who are being baptized today, showing how they have laid down their lives for Christ, how they have given their lives to Christ. They're following His example. They're following His instruction. We celebrate this today. But today is not just about them. It's about Spirit calling you here to be here today for this message. What is He trying to say? And how do you pinpoint that in? Can you find one thing? It might be 2, it might be 3. I'm not limiting, but just at least one thing in your life that you know is perishable that you've been holding on to. Something that is of weakness. Something that's cheating you of God's glory. That you can say, no more. No more. God, I need you. My church family, I need you. I'm a sinner, and I know I shall struggle, but I'm not going to live in that thing anymore. I'm going to start struggling with it, and I'm going to give it to Jesus so He has victory over it, because I want His life, and I want things to look different, something that is powerful and not weakness. Can you find that one thing and bring it to Him today? I'm not even talking about every single thing we talked about in the margins. It might be that. But is there a sin that you continue to embrace? Is there a faith step that you've been saying no to Jesus on? Is there a place of obedience that you have just been too scared to trust Him with? What is that 1 or 2 things? That's what Paul is leading us to today.